Welcome to Bayou Time. I'm Jacob DeGate and glad to be your host of this edition on HTV. I'm joined today by Chris Pulaski, who is the Director of Planning and Zoning for Terrebonne Parish. Chris, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jacob. Glad to be here.
Well, I know you've been busy, and of course, we still, each week it seems like we get a little bit further along with recovery from the storm that happened over a year ago in Hurricane Ida. Of course, some people, are still living in temporary homes. I understand you got some numbers for us to give us a little bit of update on what people are experiencing out there.
Sure. So there are two temporary housing programs still at work. We have the state's IDA sheltering program, and this is the first time that the state has ever handled or created a program like this. So, and I think for the most part, it's worked out well. It was a little bit of a slow start, but I'm sure they learned a lot for the next time, right? So we have right now a little over 1,400 travel trailers on private sites throughout Terrebonne Parish. So that means in people's driveways or in their yards, that kind of thing. We have right around 200 or just over 200 on group sites. So we're talking about Rebecca Plantation behind the truck stop at 311 and Highway 90. We're talking about existing mobile home parks or RV parks, and there's a couple out at the Civic Center. So the state's program, those guys are working with their occupants to transition them over because the state's looking to close down that program. I think tentatively they're looking at the end of this year, but if there's still people come December 31st, if there's still occupants in those units, I mean, they're working really hard to get them transitioned over into FEMA's housing program, which is a longer-term program. The state has opened an office at the corner of Alma and Monarch Drive. It's the workforce group. People who need assistance, can go there for that assistance. And if you have questions about that IDA sheltering program, the number has always been the same. It's 844-268-0301. FEMA, they have their direct housing program. As of right now, there's just under 13 units. Now, FEMA's program primarily are mobile homes. Now, they're not your typical mobile home. Typically, they're around 16 or 18 foot wide, maybe 70, 75, 80 feet long. FEMA's units are the same 14, 16 foot wide, but they're shorter. They're about 40 foot long. At any rate, they have just under 1,300 units on private sites throughout Terrebonne. They have two group sites in operation. There's Gage Court, which is kind of over in the Berg area. There's roughly about 48 units there. And then they have the site in Shreveport off of West Park and Water Plant Road area, which is just over 200 units. So that program, we are seeing, people moving out. They have 183 so far. But they just, the state requested from FEMA that they extend that program. See, that program is good for 18 months. Mm-hmm. So 18 months would be basically March 1st. So the state requested that FEMA extend that for another 6 months, and that's how FEMA works. They'll extend, but only in 6-month increments. But beginning in March, that's when, after 18 months, FEMA's program does have a monthly charge, basically rent, for those units. Now, the amount is based off of the HUD national average for that size unit. However, FEMA does allow, at the request of the state, to reduce that rate. And the state also made that request to waive the rental fee. Well, I say waive, reduce the rental fee for those who are eligible. And then most recently, the parish council requested through resolution, I believe at their last council meeting, that the state request that FEMA flat out waive the fee. So,
So there's no, at this point, a hard deadline on when that rent is supposed to start?
well, the rent would start March 1st. Now, the question is how much?
I got you.
You know, the minimum that they have to charge by federal law is $50. So we'll see. I mean, the purpose for the rent is, well, I'm sure there's a number of reasons, but one is to incentivize the occupants to seek more permanent, viable solution. But so far, I mean, FEMA, you know, we have biweekly calls with them. I know they're keeping a close eye on the group sites. They also work with the occupants of both the group sites and the private sites to help case manage those folks and provide whatever resources or information that they might need to seek something more permanent.
I do know there is some, you know, programs out there that can help some people with some of their recovery efforts or permanent housing needs, such as elevations and stuff. And if you want to go into a little bit more detail on where
Sure.
the people could find that information, what's out there.
Well, I think historically a lot of the folks in Terrebonne are familiar with our elevation programs. I mean, we've had most of the storms that we've had in you know the last 10, 20 years have been flood events. So I think people are used to seeing the elevated homes around the parish. With Ida being a wind event, we see more reconstruction happening. So the home was pretty much substantially damaged, has to be demolished, and so there's no opportunity to elevate. So we reconstruct. Of course, the new home is built to actually it's the D-firms plus 2 foot of freeboard on top of that. So the new structure is hardened. We're looking to see if we can get fortified standards for those, which is the highest standard you could have in terms of code construction. And that will, in turn, lower the home insurance premiums for that structure. But, you know, we're seeing millions of dollars coming into Terrebonne Parish through the state, through FEMA. We've got $158 million just in Terrebonne Parish for individual and household programs, $161 million just for home loans and business loans for the SBA program. We have $110 million so far for public assistance, and there's more coming. I mean, the public assistance are things like the demolition and some of the repairs that have been made to our most critical facilities and structures. But, you know, we still have other facilities, the power plant in Homa, just to name one, that, you know, that project alone, you know, is going to be, you know, 60, 70, 80 million dollars, right? So, I mean, those that public assistance is critical to help us rebuild. Flood insurance, you know, of course, with the new risk rating 2.0, Parish President Dove, along with the other coastal parish presidents in Southeast Louisiana, are working closely with our congressional delegation. We had a roundtable with Scalise and Congressman Hill from Arkansas, where we demonstrated how this new way that FEMA is calculating risk is affecting Terrebonne Parish in a negative way. And it's not just Terrebonne, of course.
Sure.
But-
And it's not accomplishing the thing it set out to accomplish because people are just simply going to drop the flood.
Well, exactly. I mean, the program itself has a risk of being defunded, you know, and what just is baffling too is that it really has nothing to do with the flood maps anymore and has to do with your level of risk as they see it.
Sure.
Which the number one way they calculate is proximity to the source, proximity to water. But as everybody knows, in Terrebonne, the highest ground is typically right next to the bayou. So it's frustrating to say the least. But, you know, from a permanent housing side, I know that's what we really wanted to focus on. We have our elevation and reconstruction program. We have submitted the first round of applicants through our hazard mitigation money to FEMA or to the state, It's been through the state. It's now being reviewed by FEMA, and there'll be subsequent rounds of applicants. So if anybody's interested in participating in the either the elevation or the reconstruction program, I would urge you to contact our ramp division, which is at 985-873-6565, 985-873-6565, and they can take your information, they can speak with you a little bit, and they may steer you, depending upon, everyone's situation is a little bit different, right? So depending upon their situation, they may steer them over to the state, because the state has what they call the Restore LA program, and they have the ability to help people rebuild. And in some instances, it might be better for someone to go through the state's program than through the parishes. It just depends on their circumstances.
Sure, sure. So a lot of programs out there. I know you mentioned earlier about working with some of the other agencies out there. I know the housing authority is one. It's not part of the parish, but it all have a mission of finding affordable housing for people. They have the Bayou Towers complex that, of course, was practically destroyed by the hurricane. What's the latest with their efforts with them?
Sure. So yes, a number of the residents from either the Homa or from Bayou Towers or Senator Circle are either still in temporary housing in one of the group sites. They might be living with family. So the Housing Authority and Terrebonne Parish's Housing and Human Services Department, which is led by Kelly Cunningham, we've all been working closely together along with some of the local nonprofit builders, such as Options for Independence. There's also some that have come into Terrebonne Parish, after the storm. You've got, the Mennonites are out doing great things in the lower Bayou communities. We also have St. Bernard Project and others like it. So we're working together to try and find opportunities to construct permanent housing solutions and working with the local developers, local landowners to acquire lots and possibly be able to use some of this money that we have coming in, hazard mitigation, FMA money, or CDBG when it becomes available.
Well, there's some coming in. I guess that's one of the, only benefits of having your area be wrecked. You do have some money to create some new things that could hopefully be better than what was there before. But we do need to take another quick break. We have some more questions that we can ask you about housing in recovery efforts. Stay tuned right here on HTV.